Greetings. I hope everyone is doing well today. We're giving everyone the opportunity to join before we get things started. All right, it is the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get things started. Greetings, all. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Designed for Environmental Health Risk Communication, Lessons from the EPA Flooded Homes website project. My name is Chris Walker, Senior Program Analyst here at the National Environmental Health Association, and I will be your host for today. Welcome. Today's webinar is brought to you by the National Environmental Health Association. Everything NEHA does, we do it to build, sustain, and empower environmental health professionals so that they are equipped and prepared to protect the health of communities across the country. We're so happy you have joined us today. If you're not already one of our 7,000 members, we hope you'll consider becoming a member. We hear repeatedly from our members how much they value our education and credentials. We offer exclusive environmental health training and have nationally recognized credentials that highlight your expertise. We also have an online community that boasts a powerful network of environmental health professionals. And we're always adding to our course catalogs and resource repositories. Joining NEHA can give you valuable discounts on things like our annual education conference, an exhibition, study materials, and books and courses. If you're interested in learning more, visit our website at neha.org. A bit of housekeeping before we hear from our speakers today. All attendees are in listen mode only. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. Throughout the presentation, you may submit any questions you have in the Q&A box. We will do our best to answer as many questions as we can after we hear from our speakers. At the conclusion of the seminar, you will receive a link to take part in an evaluation survey to provide feedback and comments on today's seminar. To introduce our speakers for today, please welcome Ariana La Finch, Program Analyst for the Environmental Protection Agency. Ariana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chris, for that introduction. As Chris mentioned, my name is Ariana Lagranad Finch. I've been with EPA for a little over 3 years now in EPA's Office of Research and Development, and I'll be presenting today's speakers, Dr. Keely Maxwell and Mary Reynolds. Dr. Keely Maxwell is a general anthropologist at EPA's Office of Research and Development. She carries out applied social science research on environmental cleanups, decontamination, and disaster waste decision-making. Mary Reynolds works as a physical scientist with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Region 4 office. She is the indoor air and radon coordinator. In this role, she provides outreach to support their work in improving indoor spaces. This webinar will discuss human-centered design techniques that environmental professionals can use to develop health risk communication. In today's presentation, we'll share the design techniques they used when creating the EPA Flooded Homes website. Their lessons learned are applicable to NEHA members developing materials for risk communication and public engagement on other environmental health topics. So now I'd like to switch it over to Dr. Keely Maxwell and Mary Reynolds. Thank you.
Hi there. Apologies, my screen started going wonky, but I think I have it figured out. So let me share my screen here. All right. So let's get going. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keely Maxwell, and I am, as Ariana said, a general anthropologist at the US EPA's Office of Research and Development. So this afternoon, Mary and I are going to be talking to you about design for environmental health risk communication, lessons from the EPA Flooded Homes website project. And I have a nice disclaimer at the bottom of the slide that indicating that this has been approved for publication, but any opinions shared are mine and mine alone. Okay, so what are we going to talk through today? There's three main sections that we're going to be going over today. I'm going to be introducing folks to the EPA SALT framework for risk communication. Then we're going to talk and get into a little bit of what is the risk communication problem with respect to flooded homes. And then we're going to be going over what did we do to do human-centered design of the Flooded Homes website, and then what is the result? How do we incorporate these changes into the website to make effective risk communication? So just to review a little bit, the EPA, as a couple of years ago, came up with a new framework for carrying out risk communication. So I'm going to be going through that framework because it's applicable to a multitude of environmental health issues across the board. So just to review a little bit, what is risk communication? What do we consider to be risk communication? The EPA draws on a large body of literature to define it as communication intended to provide a general or specific audience with the information they need to make informed, independent judgments about risks to their health, safety, and the environment. So you notice a couple of things about this definition. First, it's not about necessarily sharing this is the risk or this is your risk. It's about sharing information. And then people on their own use that information to make informed, independent judgments. So then we need to figure out, well, what is the information that they need? And who are they? Who is my audience? And what helps them make informed, independent judgments about their own risks? So there's four components that we can think about with respect to the EPA SALT framework. It's strategies, action, learning, and tools. So for strategies, as you're going in to think about a risk communication situation, you don't just want to sort of just focus on what is the information I have. Okay, let's get it all out there. You really need to really first think about, well, let's take stock here. What do we know? What do we not know? What information do we think people already have? And really thinking about what are our goals and objectives for this risk communication? What are our goals as an organization, an environmental health organization, for example? What are our objectives for what we want folks to do with this information and how we might need to we want them to use the information? And then really choosing the platforms and matching the tactics. So this is things like, okay, are we talking about communicating via a website, via videos, via a town hall meeting, and then matching the tactics and the strategies to what's appropriate. So then when you're taking action in terms of actually creating and sharing the communication, this really helps you for thinking about what are the different factors that affect communication here. What is the hazard, right? Depending on what the actual hazard is, whether it's a flood, whether it's a chemical spill, people are going to have different existing risk perceptions and risk perspectives on this hazard. There's also the relationships. And here we can think about the relationships between the audience and EPA or whatever organization you're with. The audience themselves is important, really understanding who is your audience. What is their cultural identity and norms? What do we think their degree of literacy and numeracy might be? What might be their community history with a given contaminant or pollutant? And then again, the communication factors that are really, how we can be comfortable as communicators, what strategies work best for us. And then, of course, issues of the science. One of the issues is, well, what degree of uncertainty, for example, might exist? So as we're developing the communication, we're using these broader strategies, we're taking action, considering these factors, we're doing the communication. But the idea is the learning comes into place to have reflective practice throughout. And I'll talk a little bit about how we did that throughout the process of creating the website. And then tools. There's various tools that you can use, and I'm not going to go through them all, but EPA does have a list of risk communication tools that might help. So when we're talking about, well, what are principles for doing risk communication? There are things such as having very clear goals and objectives as opposed to generally broad and vague and just kind of throwing information out there because you have it. Being meaningful and understandable. Again, you won't necessarily know what's understandable to other folks or what's meaningful to them. So then this gets back to the last one, which is know your audience. We want it to be actionable, right? We don't just want to give people information because, again, it's giving information that helps them take action and informs their actions. So it has to be actionable information. We want it to be trusted. Again, we want to have attention to both the format of the information, how it's presented, how you're sharing it, as well as the content. A lot of times we focus just on the content and getting the technical content right, but we don't really think about the format. And again, this gets back to all knowing who your audience is. So we've talked a little bit about generally what are risk communication principles and practices that EPA is trying to do in a more strategic manner using this SALT framework. But let's dig into a little bit, what is the actual risk communication problem when it comes to flooded homes? So before I started this project, I didn't really think about flooded homes as an environmental health concern. I thought about them as, a tragic aspect of a disaster, as disruptive to family life, as, needing to evacuate and come back to your home. But it wasn't until I started really working on this project that, for EPA and other environmental health professionals, flooded homes are really a major environmental health concern. And this is something that doesn't really get talked about a lot when it comes to how we're responding to disasters such as hurricanes or other events that lead to flooding. Right, there's a lot of indoor air quality and other environmental health hazards that may arise. There might be lead paint. There might be asbestos in building materials. There might be bacteria or other pathogens in the floodwaters that are now inside your home. There might be mold, such as this lovely picture of black walls that was taken after Hurricane Sandy. But the fact is that residents of homes need to get back into their homes. They need to clean them out. They need to see what belongings they can save. They need to fix up their homes. And that's a really central part of the broader community recovery and community resiliency, is getting people back into their homes and getting them, safe and sound and able to undertake their everyday life again. Well, then the question becomes, given that there's environmental health concerns, how can they do this, cleaning out and getting back in their homes and fixing them up safely and effectively? Because, apart from the existing indoor air quality hazards that may arise because of a flood, a very act of going back into the home can create new and additional environmental hazards, right? There might be electrical shocks or gas leaks that you might not realize. There might be encounters with animals that have taken up residence in your home, whether it's a spider or a snakes or other animals. If you're using a generator, carbon monoxide is a very lethal thing that kills a lot of people after disasters. And then again, it's how you're using cleaning and disinfectant products and whether your use is creating health hazards for yourself or for family members or for pets, for example. So there's these major environmental health concerns when it comes to flooded homes that, as I said, aren't necessarily talked about or discussed or very apparent when it comes to a lot of the recovery that tends to focus on, okay, how can you get funding and where to rebuild and how to rebuild. But then when it comes to communicating these health risks, there's really a current mismatch between the technical inputs into risk communication and the social inputs that inform risk communication. The technical science behind how to safely and effectively clean up flooded homes is pretty well established, right? There's this great guidance document that the EPA, among other organizations, helped put out on safely clean, decontaminate, and reoccupy your flood damaged homes. But as you can see from reading this little excerpt, it talks about use a combination of wet and dry cleaning methods as appropriate. Wet cleaning methods include washing with water and a cleaner, steam cleaning, cleaning with foaming detergent, hot water extraction, low pressure flushing, and high pressure washing. So there's a lot of information in here that addresses the technical context and what to do and what not to do and how to do it. But there's not a lot of social science input into the content or the format of this risk communication. It doesn't necessarily consider what information flood survivors find useful. It doesn't necessarily have an understanding of what their values, priorities, and risk perceptions are. And it doesn't really take into account that different social and cultural groups in the United States, different populations, both experience flooded homes and home repair differently. So just by focusing on the technical content means that you're missing out on the audience factors, the hazard factors, and these other factors that inform risk communication that you can really only get at by using social science as an input when developing risk communication. So the solution that we've been implementing and have implemented at EPA is to create the EPA Flooded Homes website. And so we did a couple, we started off saying, okay, we have some basic goals and objectives and principles here. We want to take this 103-page PDF that no one's going to read when they're standing in front of their flooded homes and turn it into a mobile-friendly, format that they can use. Instead of having very, very detailed guidance, we want to make how-to videos that are really a format that many people are familiar with these days. I know my kids are all watching how-to videos on YouTube, for example. And instead of, having a lot of technical jargon that is very accurate, really working on using language that is empathetic and having that kind of be a framing and a starting point for doing this risk communication. So we have this in mind. So then what did we do? We used these and drew upon these techniques from human-centered design to carry out some applied social science research and design and develop the Flooded Homes website. So what is human-centered design? It's really a creative approach to problem solving. This picture here is kind of the idea that there's a tip of the iceberg, right? You may think you know what the problem is that you're trying to solve, but until you do a lot more in-depth analysis and creative approaches, you won't necessarily know what is underneath the iceberg in terms of what's the real problem that you're trying to solve. It has techniques for understanding people's values, behaviors, needs, and aspirations. And again, many of these techniques draw upon applied social science and can be supplemented by applied social science techniques. And the idea is that once you can understand people's behaviors, values, needs, and aspirations with respect to a certain problem, then you can use participatory methods for developing products and services to help solve this problem. Once you've refined your notion of what the problem is. So human-centered design is a really great way of approaching risk communication because first of all, it really focuses on, again, the audience's needs. Who are these people? Really thinking about what their problem is and how they're experiencing it, and thus what information and communication they need. And then really this idea of having participatory methods for developing products and services that really puts people and incorporates their perspectives into the actual design of the product. So this is just one of many diagrams of the overall human-centered design process. It's just kind of a generic process. So it starts with research, understanding who are the users or who is the audience for risk communication, and trying to be very empathetic towards them and develop empathy towards and understanding what their needs are, what their concerns, etc. Then you generate some insights from this research, and there's a variety of methods you can use to synthesize your findings, and really focus in, again, on what's the specific problem I'm trying to solve. Then you do what's called ideation or brainstorming of possible solutions to the problem and develop prototypes or specific solutions. But you actually go then and test these prototypes and say, do they work or not? Instead of just coming up with, one brainstorm and now we're going to have a full-fledged solution and go all for it. We're going to really iterate and go back and forth between research, insight generation, developing and testing prototypes to really hone in on creating specific solutions. And there's some information at the bottom for links for where to find out more about this process and how to go about doing it and putting it into operation. So the first thing that we did for the Flooded Homes website was to establish our design principles. And this really gets back to sort of risk communication. What are our goals and objectives? But this really had to do with not just what are our goals and objectives, but what are our principles for what we want the website to look like, feel like, do, accomplish, etc. So we said, how can we have the website become a trusted source of technical information that meets people where they're at after a flood? And this might be socially, technologically, emotionally, culturally, economically, and helps them take action. So again, it gets to the idea that we want them to take action. But instead of just saying, how can the website be the most technically accurate website ever, we're really saying we want it to become a trusted source of information, of technical information. And that's a slightly different. It means that we're going to do different things when we create the website to try to implement these principles. And again, the idea of meeting people where they're at, because we recognize that people with different hazard experiences and who have gone through different types of floods, who are in different social and economic and cultural groups and populations with different health issues, might be having very different experiences. So how can we make a single website that somehow helps people, again, in all those different places that they might be at? It's kind of a challenge. So the first thing we did was hold focus groups. And there were 2 groups that we held, and this was external to EPA. First thing we did was actually go to, not directly to communities themselves who had been through floods, because we weren't really sure what questions we wanted to ask, and we didn't want to really waste their time or waste their emotional energy without really knowing why we wanted to talk to them or what we wanted to talk to them about. So we really focused on soliciting input from disaster social scientists who have worked with a lot of flood survivors specifically about what are the issues that you think are really important and that we should talk to people about and we should consider when we're designing the website. Internal to EPA, we also held focus groups with a lot of people who are on the front lines, dealing with flooding every day in the response mode, for example, and learning from their experiences, and also helping build constituencies for the website. So a couple key points of feedback from the focus groups. One is that we really needed to address the differences between renters and homeowners. Everyone emphasized they have very different experiences when they go through floods. They have very different concerns and constraints, and the website needs to take this into account. The other thing that came up again and again was this idea of how mistrust and frustration were really affecting survivors' decisions and actions that they were taking. There was this very explicit emotions that were going on and things that really affected how people made the decisions, what they did, whether whom to hire as a contractor, or how to apply for insurance, or what they're doing. And these were things we needed to take into account. The next thing we did, so we wanted to have these how-to videos, so we reviewed the video scripts. And the techniques that we're using that I'm sharing here are something that, again, can be done to other types of reviews of video scripts or other communication scripts beyond just flooded homes. So first of all, we had an interagency technical review. We had folks from technical experts from EPA, from FEMA, from HUD, CDC, a bunch of, excuse me, acronymed federal agencies involved with flooded homes from different perspectives. And then we did our own social science review. So this is a small team of us looking at all of these video scripts. And we used a couple different approaches. One is one that we're calling PBJ logic. This does indeed stand for peanut butter and jelly logic. The idea here is that when you look through the scripts, you want to make sure they're providing step-by-step instructions that are in a logical order and inclusive of all the things that you need to know from the perspective of the audience. So the idea is if you tell someone how to make a peanut butter sandwich and you just tell them put the peanut butter and jelly on top of the bread, but you don't tell them they need to take off the lid of the jar, or maybe they need a knife, or maybe they need to take the bread out of the package, you're not going to get a good sandwich. So having these step-by-step logical instructions from the perspective of the audience. The second is drawing from the public health literature and these theories of behavior change. And this is the idea that in order to have people make changes to their behavior, so make changes to how they might re-enter their home or how they might clean up their home, we need to choose language and be very careful about the language choices we make. We need to organize the information in a certain way that encourages health protective behaviors. So that this isn't just done by, sharing information and they'll say, oh, I have this information, now I'm going to change my behavior. And you have to structure and organize the information, in this case, the video scripts, in particular ways that are thought by the literature to encourage health protective changes in behavior. So just an example, and the final point, I'm sorry, I forgot to say, let's say reverse here. Okay, yes. I'm going back and forth in the wrong way, is to be very empathetic. We talked about that again, and being very respectful and realistic, right? So the photo on the right shows a bunch of people wearing some full-fledged PPE to clear out a basement after Hurricane Sandy and a flooding there. And so again, the technically accurate thing is to say wear PPE, right? This is a very good choice. But if we just say this and we aren't empathetic and respectful and realistic by the fact that maybe people can't find PPE because it's the middle of a pandemic, for example, as it was, then we're not going to necessarily get them to change their behavior in any meaningful way if we're not recognizing where they're starting from and what their constraints are and being empathetic to their situation. Okay, let's go for it. So just an example of some video scripts, and I'm pointing out some points. So I'll read them out loud in case we have folks who need to be who could learn more better that way. So the before, divide materials into 3 categories based on their moisture absorption and drying nature and how sensitive they are to moisture damage. Non-porous materials do not absorb water at all or absorb water at a negligible rate. So again, technically accurate, but I don't really think about my household belongings in terms of their porosity levels. So how we changed it. An important and difficult part of cleaning up after a flood is separating materials and items in your home that you can save from what you need to throw away. Let's take a look at how to decide what to keep and clean and what to remove to protect you and your family's health from continued exposure to germs, bacteria, and mold. So we have some very empathetic language, recognizing that it's important and difficult. We have peanut butter and jelly logic. We're going to show you how to decide what to keep and clean and what to remove. And then theories of behavior change, the idea of focusing on family's health as a motivator for changing your behavior for what you decide to keep or throw away. So the next stage that we did was doing interviews with flood survivors and volunteers. And we talked with folks who had been through a variety of types of flooding incidents, types of hazards in a variety of places around the country, etc. So here are a couple key insights. Remember, human-centered design is not just about synthesizing the information to get key insights. So here's a couple ones that really informed our design of the website. The one was that senior family member needs were a priority along with children. We knew going into this that children's health was likely to be a priority for people making decisions about going back into their flooded home and cleaning it up. We did not realize until after we did the interviews how much senior family needs were a priority, driving people's decisions about whose home to clean up, how to clean it up, where to clean it up, which rooms to clean up first, and all these factors. So one person said the main thing was getting Pa and Ma out of the house, and that just kind of exemplifies this perspective. The second was that people were operating on very limited information for decisions. And they also involved family outside the affected area to help them search for information on how to safely clean up, where to get help, where to find contractors, where to apply for assistance, right? So we had people saying, we looked on Facebook and Twitter. That was where they were trying to find out information about how to safely clean up their homes. Similar to the first focus groups, we found out there was a lot of mistrust and frustration, but also lots of helpers. All of a sudden, they just started showing up. So you have a lot of helpers, which is great, but then you also need to help manage the helpers effectively and make sure that they're doing what you want them to do and not like throwing out your best china because maybe they think it's contaminated. But again, the mistrust and frustration were very apparent here and really driving people's decisions. So that reflected what we heard before. And the last is that repair is just this long emotional process, right? There are things to this day that are not right and are never going to be right. So the idea that, again, this need to consider emotions and have empathy was very important for how can we design the Flooded Homes website to show emotions, show empathy, to support people throughout this long process. So one of the things that was a participatory design activity that we did was card sorting. And this was all virtual, so there weren't literal cards. What we had was a bunch of, sort of place titles on a whiteboard rather that we shared. And we asked interviewees to rank potential Flooded Homes website topics from high to low. And then we looked at what were the EPA topical priorities for communicating health risks. So we saw there were some big discrepancies between what interviewees thought was important information they needed to know and information they were interested in learning more about versus priorities for EPA from an environmental health perspective, right? So the good thing is that one of the number one concerns for EPA, mold tips, was also very high. Everyone wanted to know what to do about mold, how to get rid of it. The bad news for EPA was that issues that it was very concerned about for people's health, lead paint and asbestos, no one cared about them. No one wanted to click on them, right? They were like, this is not a priority. Why would I click on this? And so this shows you, again, the importance of getting feedback from prospective audience members when you're doing risk communication and designing it. So then what did we do? How did we actually change the website in response to what we learned from the interviews and the card sorting? One is that we had a new topic, renter-specific information, that we added after hearing again from everyone the importance and different experiences for renters and what they needed to know. In terms of this discrepancy between no one cared about asbestos and lead and wanted to click on that, we grouped it together with mold to better attract interest, and Mary can show you how that plays out on the actual webpage. And then we have this additional resources and help, where we learned about issues that were important to the survivors, right? Such as, first aid, getting aid, trash disposal, and other things, family information, but that weren't necessarily on our list that we were going to initially include as part of environmental health risk communication. But we decided, well, if we can tell them what they want to hear or need to know about in a comprehensive manner, then they'll maybe have behavior change when it comes to certain behaviors with respect to flood environmental health risks. So the next step and final step that we did was usability testing of the prototype website. So we got a draft website together and we tested this, right? So we used, this is a little bit different from what you might hear as UX testing or user experience testing, because we used an approach that really focuses on, is it usable to viewers in the context that they have, right? So we developed these scenarios and had a script and asked volunteers to help test the website based upon this script. So we, talked about, okay, a river near your house flooded a week ago and you had to evacuate. So the news is reporting that the roads are clear and you want to get back home. So you're trying to prepare yourself. Someone told you about the EPA Flooded Homes webpage and you decide to check it out to see what you might need to know and bring with you before entering your home, right? So then we, share a draft of the website and ask the tester to walk us through how would you find information about how to safely enter your home for the first time and what you might need to bring. And as they're doing so, we can ask additional prompt questions about, well, what else might you do? What did you do, right? What would you click on? What stands out in the page? And really get their broad perspective on the web page. So here I'm going to actually turn it over to Mary, who's going to walk us through some pieces about what you might find on the website and a little bit more. So Mary, I'll turn it over to you and just let me know to shift the slides, move the slides.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keely, for that wonderful overview. And now this is going to be the final product. So right here, we just have a screenshot, and we will go through the website once we're finished with this presentation to kind of help reduce any technical issues there. So this is just what a preview of what it looks like. But the next slide, I wanted to highlight a few key things to kind of tie back to what Keely was mentioning before. So kind of making things easier and what people could digest. And so before we had those two categories of non-porous items and absorbent items, and, you know, best guess on what to do with it. But here we actually have a graphic that has the pictures there to kind of include broad categories. So things you can keep and clean. You have your metal items, any plastic furniture, jewelry, or any silverware or glass. The maybe category, which is always the biggest question, you know, if you can wash it, such as clothes or soft furniture or things like that, or even some appliances, if the electronics have not been destroyed, you know, see if it's going to look like it's a maybe, see if you can get rid of some of that mold there, or definitely best to remove it. Those bigger furniture items like mattresses, and kind of highlighted the medicine there as well. Some people do try to keep some medicine that has been mold on it, and that's definitely something to remind folks. So this is a great graphic that really makes it easier for people to understand. And then next slide as well. So this one is also another great graphic that the team produced to kind of highlight some of the hazards in the home. And again, asbestos and lead were not featured as important items during the card sorting activity. And so we included them in this to kind of highlight, hey, there could be some asbestos concerns. You know, if there's roof damage or some lead-based paint concerns as you are tearing out the walls or remodeling there as well. So we highlighted some of those key aspects there with these numbers, even included some shock hazard, which no one mentioned in any of the activities there, but that is a huge issue. Any flood damage things, trying to plug things into a wall can lead to some shocks. So we try to highlight those hazards that can be found in a home here and try to make it easy for folks to find that information and think about as they enter their homes to clean up. So next slide, please. So yeah, just to summarize what the group did is the keys to success there is definitely have a team from many different disciplines. Our broad approach there really helped bring this project to get the most out of it and have those different opinions bring forth what is something that everyone can use, and definitely be open and accept some imperfection as well. This project definitely took a lot of time and effort, and we got to the best we could, and check our assumptions as well to make sure we're not bringing anything to the table that might be foreseen as you know, damaging or issue or problematic. And there definitely were some challenges. The recruitment for folks takes a lot of time, you know, doing the interviews. COVID happened as well, that usability testing. Really, we wanted to get a product out there that was great and usable. And the effort was there, but it's definitely a challenge to get there. And so next time, try to combine some of the more technical and social science reviews to kind of help speed up the process, and definitely add in some more community reviews as well to make sure the product that we have is going to be used by the communities. And do you have anything else to add, Keely?
No, that's it. Again, like the recruitment, when I say a lot of time, it took weeks upon weeks, and we did so much outreach and sort of had this huge net of trying to reach people for the interviews and the card sorting. And it took a lot of time. And so I think, again, in terms of how replicable that is, obviously, if you're in a, you know, a risk, you know, emergency situation, you might not have that time. But if you are thinking about a longer term product, that, you know, definitely thinking about how you can build in the time to really make sure you're getting the feedback from the right people, the people who are closest to your intended audience. That was really took the most time. We could have, picked people off the street, or maybe not literally because it was during COVID, but we could have, had random volunteers of people that we knew, right? But we wanted to really get to like, who's our audience and how can we get feedback from them? And that took the greatest amount of time, was to do the recruitment. And definitely the usability testing during COVID, we had people like hugging their screens and holding their phones, and it was this whole process. But we were able to do it. So I guess that also shows that, you can do this even under different circumstances for carrying out this type of work. That's all.
Awesome. So yeah, next slide is just a thank you to the group. Thank you everyone who helped participate in this, from our federal and state partners to our collaborators as well. So thank you very, very much for all of your hard work. This is a great product. And now I'm going to start sharing my screen and show you what the product looks like. All right, so this is the website here. And as Keely mentioned, we kind of have these 4 categories. So you have your coming home, you're doing it yourself, protecting your health, where we included some other information there about asbestos and lead, and then some additional resources as well, and kind of clump them together in these kind of 4 key areas of information. Also on this side here, we have some list of current disasters. So if there was a recent hurricane or any sort of flooding event, it does go in this like red label here. And then some other related links. So financial assistance for those that need it after a disaster, some more information about mold, research partnership for those that are interested. And then recently we did just publish the Spanish version of this website, which I will show in just a second. And we also have a link to natural disasters in Spanish as well for our Spanish speaking community. And so this is the Spanish version of this. And so it's kind of very similar layout. We try to keep everything the same to kind of mirror each other, but it's all available in Spanish here. Returning to the home, before you enter, as you enter. So the same kind of videos and information provided both for English and Spanish as well. In the protecting your health, we also have asbestos and lead and any other generators. And you can ask questions as well in the Spanish version. So I just wanted to highlight a little bit here of the coming home page. So you can see we have these links beforehand. So before you enter, and it's kind of in that chronological order of what's the steps you're going to take. So you before you enter, there's a video to show what to look for. We have the text on this side here, and then an accompanying video as well. And we provide some additional information such as permits, look at for your property information, floodplain officials. And then, before you enter, and then it's as you enter as well, we have some key points and warnings here. Make sure the electricity is off. That shock hazard that people forget about when electricity and metal things are wet. And then it's what to wear, before you enter the home. And then tools needed for that repair. And so I'm going to highlight this video here. And you can see we also link to other portions throughout the website. So if I click on that, it'll go right to there. But here on this video, you can see, and I thought I buffered it beforehand, but it might have lagged before. But there's a picture of the items. And then it's going to go step by step. Here's some goggles, gloves, and you can see it on the corner there. It lists the items as well. So you kind of have both that visual and textual representation within the video. And so you can see a first aid kit, sunscreen that people forget when they're outside working in these environments, list to the emergency phone numbers in case of accidents or things like that. And so we do try to provide pictures of the items as well as that. And then the other portion here of do it yourself. So these are the how-to videos specifically where we do go step by step. So we talk about the roof and the windows. Again, it's kind of in kind of chronological order. Removing the standing water as well. So I liked this video here where they do provide a little bit of a simulation of trying to remove the water from the home and trying to gauge how that water is leaving the home, if there are issues where there's still some water outside, but it's or stuck inside, how to help remove that. And so you kind of have a mix of videos there or still images like we saw in the other video. This is a simulation. And so, you know, we have those computer graphics there. And then this next video, wall cleanup and removal. You have actual people doing the work here. So you can see someone is looking and cutting away the drywall right there. You have instructions on the side panel as well. Someone is there doing the work, measuring, making sure it's above 2.5 feet of the material is removed and measuring those items as you do remove those walls. So we have those tips, how-to videos as people can watch through and make sure their house is cleaned accordingly. In addition, I wanted to highlight, you know, we still relate to things throughout the website. So lead-based paint is here and what to wear as well as you are in the home. And we do have those warnings in orange. And then finally, just because I do think it's so interesting that folks did not highlight asbestos or lead. So during our Protecting Your Health page, those are the first things listed. So people are most interested in mold, but you have to kind of scroll down. Again, this is the graphic that I showed previously, but you have to scroll through the asbestos information and the lead information before you get to that good mold information that everybody is looking for. So that is kind of the basics there. You can play around with it. It's epa.gov/flooded-homes. And we can put that link in the chat for those that want to look at it. But yeah, I will now turn it over to Chris to help facilitate some question and answers.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Keely Maxwell and Mary Reynolds for this presentation. A lot of great information, and thank you, Mary, for even demonstrating. So that was awesome. Now we're going to take some questions from the audience. Feel free to use the Q&A box if you have any. But this is going to be both for Dr. Maxwell and Mary. Let's see. First question, are there any next steps for iterating on this product? Is there usable feedback from users with the current pages as is?
I can start there because sorry, I was trying to do the unmute. So you know, the biggest next step that we just did a couple of months ago was the Spanish version. You know, I think in terms of the actual next steps, you know, our goal is to try to continue to add additional content. We probably won't be necessarily developing new videos because that was kind of from a one-time funding source and project, right, like that. But the idea is to continuously update and iterate the website in terms of incorporating a broader range of information. At this point, you know, we haven't gotten a lot of specific feedback from users about things to include. And Mary, I can sign it over to you if you have you know, can think of anything specific. But at this point, I think the main thing so far was doing the Spanish version. Mary, were there specific updates? I'm trying to.
Yeah, that was the biggest update was the Spanish version. That was the most feedback we have gotten. And I agree from what I've been told, we haven't had specific information. There's been kind of specific requests about like the renter versus homeowner using this and more questions about who's actually using this. And there has been some demonstrated analytics there of web traffic to show that when there are major issues, such as the hurricane cleanup and the recent floods, both in Kentucky and Vermont, I believe, the website has received some more traffic. And so we're kind of hoping to gauge and get some more feedback from the folks that have been using this to see if there are areas of improvement. But so far, nothing major other than the Spanish one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. We have another question. With flooding, how important are regional aspects in determining which hazards are most important to prioritize? For example, a more humid climate versus dry climate, mountain versus valley.
Yeah, this is, definitely something that's hard as EPA because we're supposed to be, a national organization. But this is something that we did here. And I think it was both affecting what the major hazards were that you might need to consider, whether it was, mold versus other types of related hazards. Definitely the issue of the temperature, right? Is flooding happening in hot weather versus very cold, like say, upper Midwest spring flooding after snow melt is going to be a very different risks and hazards with respect to, flooding in Florida in late August with an early hurricane or something. So that context is definitely very important. And that's one of the things Mary can talk about, sort of how the different regions in EPA are trying, can address those a little better. But also the other thing that it does affect is people's risk perspectives, right? So we heard, for example, in some of our interviews from folks in Louisiana, they're in Florida, they're going, mold? That's not an issue. We got mold all the time, right? So their idea of what the hazard and their perspective and about what was the biggest risk was also informed by sort of their existing experience and the geographic context, which was interesting. So Mary, I don't know if you want to add to that about.
Yeah, from a regional perspective. So I work in the Southeast region and out of Atlanta. And so, yes, that's very true. There's always mold in the Southeast. And yeah, a lot of people don't think otherwise until a major storm happens where their whole house is then covered. And with the humid environments, it's definitely a lot more mold growth than a place that is, drier climates. And so that's where in the regional offices, we really kind of work to tailor to our areas. So when we know a hurricane is coming, because we can prepare for those a little bit more in the Southeast, we send out these messages here that kind of highlight the flooded homes resources. We have a bunch of other kind of EPA indoor air quality flooding related information. So we try to bring that information out before, people lose power and stuff. And so, in different areas, like recently in Region 1 with the flooding from the rainstorms and the rivers as well, they had a different approach with that and kind of still use this tool to provide that base information. Like Keely said, we kind of had a national approach, but they kind of tailored then their social media or their outreach messages to kind of say, look at the river, it's still not swollen yet. It hasn't peaked yet. And if you're still experiencing this flooding, how to get out safely and things like that. So we kind of really tailor the messages across the regions to the environments as well. So we kind of do this as a baseline information and then provide more specific resources depending on our communities.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Well, first, a quick comment. Excellent presentation. The revised messaging is very clear and straightforward. As a public environmental health professional and educator, have you had feedback to these posters, info, and videos from the public and or persons that have used these educational aids? Any interesting feedback to share?
I can talk a little bit about the pre-release. So we did, as part of the usability testing, we did test these materials specifically, and we got very positive feedback about the design of the specific graphics, for example, that Mary showed you. So in terms of actually after release, yeah, I don't know, Mary, if you've heard in terms of some of your outreach and engagement efforts, anything from that.
As far as our specific outreach, again, a lot of positive feedback, especially from our community partners and states and local agencies as well, who do amplify these messages, specifically when it comes to hurricane season down here in the Southeast. But so a lot of great feedback from folks that are also spreading these messages. I haven't specifically heard from community members itself. I think that's kind of a little bit more difficult and a challenge there, or maybe a look for future kind of information is to get to people that are using these videos. I do send out these videos a lot when people come to me for mold questions. I get those about like 500 calls a year from the public of I have mold, what do I do? And so I do refer them to this website, even if it hasn't necessarily had a flooded home, just for some of those do-it-yourself kind of information, like removing the wall cleanup or floor cleanup as well. And from those folks that I've gotten that are not necessarily specific flooded homes, they do really appreciate the videos. It really showed them what to do, what to look for if they hired contractors, making sure the contractors are doing the right work as well, and are actually removing all of the water and completely drying out the area to prevent mold growth in the future. So, so far, all very positive things. But yeah, I think we could get a little bit more feedback from community members.
Okay. A few more questions before we close. Is there any outreach done by EPA to direct individuals before, during, and after a flood to this product?
Yeah, and I can speak to that one as the regional office. This is definitely something we focus on. And yes, we do have outreach before, during, and after. So again, with the hurricanes being in the Southeast, we always have that before messaging of how to prepare safely for a flood, the generator information as well. If you lose power, and try to kind of get these resources out before, disaster strikes, and, before you can get that information. But that's not always the case. Flooding happens pretty quickly and unexpectedly, especially with the more intense rainfall happening. And so during and after those moments, we do try to push out these messaging as well. And again, it's kind of region specific. So, region 1, I know with the Vermont floods back, I believe that was August or early September, they were pushing out a lot more information about flooded homes on their social media pages, working with state and local representatives, and trying to kind of get that information out after the fact. But region 4 was quiet during that time because we didn't have any of that information. So yeah, we do work with that.
Got it. Thank you both for taking time to answer some questions. I see that we do have one more question, but if you both can kind of see it and maybe type out the response, that would be helpful as we kind of start closing things down. So, I do want to share some of the updates that we have within our organization. Our 2024 annual educational conference and exhibition will be in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania this year, or in 2024, on July 15th through the 18th of 2024. Our focus will be on new horizons and building bridges to shape the future of environmental health. If you're interested in submitting an abstract, you may do so through October 23rd. So that is next Monday. So if you have any thoughts or ideas, please consider doing so. As well as the exhibition registration is currently open. And attendee registration will be open on December 1st. So please mark your calendars. We would love to see you in person and would love to be able to connect with you. You see the QR code for more information that you can kind of capture, or you can find more information at www.neha.org/AEC. Our time has come to an end. I would like to thank Dr. Keely Maxwell and Mary Reynolds for your presentation on the EPA Flooded Homes website project. A lot of great information. I would encourage all attendees to be able to share links and share this great resource. Thank you all to our attendees for joining us today. Keep an eye out for a survey from NEHA so we can continue to improve and provide valuable information to the environmental health workforce. We thank you for your time and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.